Hey everybody, welcome back. I want to welcome Turbo again. Thank you for being here, Turbo.
Thank you for having me.
So today we are going to start getting into the meat and potatoes of some of the hearings that took place on the 30th, 31st, and then August 1st. Today we are, in this video, going to focus mainly on the suppression hearings, but because the hearing lasted the entire second day, we most likely will break it into 3 parts. So this first video, as long as we can get through it all, I plan on doing pretty much the whole morning through early afternoon, because the 2 witnesses that testified later in the day on Wednesday, each kind of deserve their own focus, I think. I don't know if you would categorize, it is that as well, or what your thoughts are.
Yep, for sure. That's exactly the way I think we should do it, Aspen. Because certainly, who do we have? We have Harshman, and who do we have up today? We have the warden, the former warden of Westville, John Gallipo.
Yes.
And then we get into
Maps.
a woman in internal affairs at Westville. Yeah, Miss
Yes.
Maps. And Lieutenant Jerry Holman.
Correct. But before we even do any of that, we get like a 45-minute summation by attorney Rosie, and going over what he believed to be very pertinent information.
Yeah. He did a roadmap for us.
Yes.
So we did start off day 2 with increased security.
Yes,
and they
I have that.
Yeah.
And what I have written down was that there was social media use had been caught in court the day before.
Yeah, there was some live tweeting going on from the courtroom. So they increased security, inspecting the wallets and purses, and actually everybody started to leave their phones in the buckets there, didn't they? A lot of people left them.
Yes.
At security at the entrance to the courthouse.
And I don't know about anyone else, but I was very helpful, and I put my passcode on a Post-it note and sat it there on it, so that if ISP really wanted to find out some things, here's your opportunity, boys. I'm kidding. But no, of course. So I think that's now. So the 3rd hearing, someone's gotten a lashing out for having a smartwatch or a tweet or something.
There seems like, I don't know. Just continues to be issues, I guess.
Because some people can't follow the rules.
Seems that way.
Before we get into some of it too, is I do have that we did start on time. So court was scheduled to start at 9 a.m. that morning. And that
excuse me,
that at 8:49 or 8:48, the victims' families did all kind of come in the courtroom at the same time, right behind Jerry Holman. That Janice and Kathy were there, and that they brought Richard Allen in at 8:54 a.m.
Yeah.
And he definitely acknowledged them a little bit more as he was passing by them that morning. And
he did.
I believe that he kind of mouthed "love you guys," but I've heard a few
wink at Kathy, actually.
Yeah, and I've heard a few different people, say they thought he said, "love you" or "I love you." I thought he said "love you guys," but either way, so once they took the pink handcuffs off Richard Allen and put him in his, put him down in his seat, I then noticed he turned immediately back around, and
Yeah.
kind of gave Janice and Kathy what to me looked like a very kind of the kind of a smile that like you're very familiar with if you're with someone for a long time. So if you've got a partner that you've been with for a long time, I can see where like that's a look they've probably given each other
1,000 times,
many times,
10,000 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right just before that happened, Andrew Baldwin had come over and warned Kathy and Janice to be prepared for what they were going to hear that day.
Do you have
and
the quote there?
Yep. Sorry. Sorry, Aspen, say it again.
I said, and you have the quote. You have the actual quote there.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what was heard. Yep. Baldwin warned Kathy and Janice to be prepared for what they were going to hear today.
Be prepared.
This was on day 2. This was on day 2.
Be prepared to hear the stuff was the exact quote.
Okay. Yep. So Judge Gall started things off at 9, like you say, and she got right into the jury questionnaire process. She noted that the jury questionnaires were going out that day, which was July 31st. Okay, I wrote down going out today.
Yeah, to the postmaster, I'm sorry.
Yeah, quantity of 600 to the Allen County citizens. They have a letter. They were sending out a letter and a questionnaire. And they wanted them back by August 23rd.
Yes.
There was mention of paper and a flash drive.
Yeah, so what they said was that once they're returned, they will then be sent to the attorneys via paper and flash drive for the counsel to review. And that, then starting on October 14th in Allen County will be the first day of jury selection. Their goal is to interview 50 potential jurors a day. And that the first day of the...
Yep. Sorry, I have 50 jurors per round. There's 100 per day. The jury selection is going to run from the 14th to the 18th, and they were going to be seating the 50 at a time at 8:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. is what she had gone through there.
Right, and 18th is actually the date that they have scheduled to be the first day of opening statements in Carroll County. So I figured if they have the 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th, that gives them a full 4 days to they can get through that number of jurors, as long as there's not too much fighting.
Yeah, I do recall that when they had when they received 450 responses from the first round, back in March, April, I guess it was. That lines up with, I mean, they send 600 out, they don't get them all back, and
of course not. You get people move, those things, that don't update their address.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you had that 50 per session, because I had 50 per day. So I apologize if I wrote that down incorrectly.
Oh yeah, that's okay. So right at 9:03 a.m., Rosie withdrew the motion to suppress the second interview with Holman, which was a huge motion for them.
Right, and it kind of came out of nowhere, and then there was really nothing more said or anything about it. So I mean, in the moment, I remember thinking like, why would they do this? I mean, I since then have realized that I think it was just time constraints, and that I fully expect them to possibly refile it. Yeah. But I think everyone was a little surprised by that when it happened.
Oh, definitely. It was like, whoa. and that second interview with Holman that Alan had done, that actually took place on October 26th, 2022, when him and Kathy went in to pick up the Ford Focus.
Right, in Lafayette.
So there was a lot of information in that filing, and I'm sure that there would be a lot more to come out if that motion were to be put forth again, which, like, I'm in agreement with you. I'm sure we're going to see it filed again.
Well, yeah, no, I think that would have been at least a half-day hearing, because I believe that, as soon as you open the door to an interrogation, I think it opens the door to the other interrogations. I think it opens the door to then, like having, the Doolin tip, all of that kind of being a little bit more fair game and more relevant to that.
Yeah.
To what led to them having that interview on the 26th.
How many pretrial hearings, like how many more motions to suppress do you think are going to get filed? Because, I mean, my understanding is typically there's several pretrial hearings before a trial of this nature, and we've only had the one.
Right. Granted, they did, most pretrial hearings don't usually last 3 days, but
right.
But I mean, that's also been a complaint that a lot of people have had towards this judge, that that they feel like there should have been more hearings granted for things that people have felt like were kind of denied without a hearing. So, I mean, if jury selection starts on October 14th, that's
running out of time.
That's literally what.
Not long.
It's 2 months. It's less than 2 months away.
Yeah. And I mean, they're going to try to suppress other evidence. Like, I don't see how do we have a pending motion to suppress the bullet? Because I guess that was kind of covered embedded within the Franks, wasn't it?
I believe it might have been within the Franks.
But, wasn't that, I can't, I mean, we looked at that bullet stuff last year, wasn't it?
Right.
I don't know. It's been, I just think that there's,
I don't want to go too far off track as far as kind of going through the procedural stuff, but we also do have the hearing on the 23rd coming up, which I think anyone would be remiss, and I think that's probably going to open some new doors to where are we going, or what's happening next. And I remember,
so there's been a lot of chatter about that hearing and the fact that it's closed to the public in the morning, but I do think people forget that Judge Gull went on record long ago saying that she wasn't going to have any more in-chambers meetings because of the things that have gone on. And I think that that's what's going to go on there is, administrative type things that they should be able to do in a different format. But given what's transpired, I think that it's going to happen in open court with her court recorder there. And I don't know what you think, but that's what I think's happening in the morning, and that's why it's closed to the public.
I think that, I mean, I know we can talk about that at a later time, but I came away from these 3 days of hearings with a very strong concern over one particular thing, and I have a feeling that we're going to see some of that play out. And
what's that?
I don't know, as far as I don't know. I will was this Rosie's big day?
Yeah.
And so Rosie stood up and he said, what was what rights of our clients were violated, and he referenced the 5th Amendment, he referenced the 6th Amendment, the 14th Amendment. He said a sprinkling of the 8th Amendment. He then cited 2 different Indiana codes, 3446.3.1 and then 2533.1.
17, right?
And then I the next note I have is that what I thought to be a very interesting analogy or way to visualize what he was going to be talking about with these confessions that, Alan had allegedly given. And he referred to them as 5 compartmentalized buckets.
Mm-hmm.
Those 5 buckets, in one of them are his statements to his family. In one of the buckets, it's the companions, the other inmates that he was with that were in the SNAP program. The third bucket would be the guards. The fourth bucket, I have the warden and the chaplain, possibly.
In written form, they said.
And then the fifth would be Dr. Walla.
Yep. I just wanted to make one addition to your comment right before the buckets about the exceptions to privilege. Those 2 code statutes. It's the doctor-patient privilege code, and there's 2 exceptions to the privilege. They said there. Sorry, not 2 exceptions. There was 2 points made here by Rosie. Communication exists between the doctor and patient, and there are exceptions if the statements are not privileged if criminal statements are made. So that's where they get into the exception to the doctor-patient privilege. So I just wanted to point that out.
True, and I believe that clergy can be that same. Or I think they have that same loophole in theirs. I believe.
Yeah, I don't know that they didn't discuss it a lot, but I think that you're right. But I don't know the particulars on it.
The state did. I mean, and we'll talk about this later, but the state did reference that they don't have access to the chaplain.
Right.
And Rosie himself then said he believes there was a written statement to the chaplain.
Yep.
But that
that's up next, actually.
That he hasn't been able to locate it. And and it's appropriate that the state would not have that. I mean, like, I'm glad that the state's not able to come in and just like pull your pastor aside and like make him tell you what the pre-trial detainee has said to them, because it's important to remember Richard Allen is still a pre-trial detainee and not been convicted of anything. So he should be afforded, those basic rights. I did note here that Diener was the lead chair today. Mm-hmm. This was the day, if you remember, Nick didn't speak much. Like, he sat there on on the third chair. And it really was Diener almost the entire day.
Yeah, so Stacy Diener, she agreed with that there are categories for the confessions, but she wanted to add 2 more buckets. And one of the buckets was a multiple person category, whereas there was more than one person that heard the confession that Alan made. And the second category was video movement of Alan. So there was an entire bucket of confessions that she felt for nursing staff, Dr. Martin, the physician, the warden, and Dr. Walla. They all were privy to. There was various people, not just multiple people, but it was all on video of the confessions made to multiple people. And so that they wanted to know why the chaplain confession statement had not been provided, and Rosie did respond that he approved that. And he says, I don't have it. It's some type of letter that was written to the chaplain. It might be somewhere. It exists in thousands of documents. You are going to get the exhibits for the confessions that we have on paper. They said there's 24/7 video for the last 8 months. We're picking every moment of incriminating statement out. Is what he said. Like, that's how many there are. And then there's the handheld camcorder also for the video footage of the confessions. And then he made mention of showers, which I'm not too sure on that one.
Well,
did you have that written down?
I did, but really quickly, I do want to say, now he did say, what did you say right before then?
Which, sorry? The 2 buckets from...
No. After that,
the chaplain and the letters and the confessions that they have on paper along with the video.
I do have it written down here that it's gone out of my head. I do have a footnote written down though that Rosie made a comment about how much video there really is to cover.
Yeah. Of confessions.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, Diener did ask to dismiss the suppression motion. And then
well
the handheld. Oh, so what you were saying is the handheld video. The handheld video cameras exist. He said even in the showers, and that there's hours and hours of footage.
Yeah, voluminous amount of footage. Now,
we'll get to it when we get to the testimony. But the warden then later testifies that it's their policy that Alan is videotaped on those handheld cameras anytime he's transported anywhere within Westville, to and from. So he specifically says, to the showers and from the showers. He does not say in the showers.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas Rosie, and I'm not sure. Which one, is inaccurate in their statement, but clearly there's a discrepancy there.
Yeah. I didn't have any more detail on the showers from Rosie.
I've got the family and guards audio transcript video.
Yeah.
Rosie cannot guarantee that they will include everything. I thought this was interesting. Rosie cannot guarantee that they will include everything due to the volume.
Yeah.
And suggests at that point that they may possibly need to have another hearing, if you will, Judge, to deep dive it.
Oh wow!
And at that point, I'd written a side note that was like, Brad, isn't that what we're here for? and I'm not, and that's nothing against Mr. Rosie. I just, I was like, we're here to talk about those things today.
Yeah. I wrote that it was difficult to package all of them up.
Right.
Filtering through all the confessions.
Right. And that is when Rosie also presented Judge Gull with a thumb drive from his estimation of all of the confessions.
Right.
I have a side note here that says Alan is watching Diener and listening very intently to what she's saying. It seems very engaged.
And I have a side note when Rosie was talking about that it was difficult to package all of his confessions up. Baldwin was talking to Richard Allen during that time.
Yes. Yeah, because this day, Andrew Baldwin was sitting in the third chair as well. And he and Richard Allen, they have a very casual rapport with each other. I think I mentioned that yesterday. But you can tell that they actually that they have, that they care for each other, and that there's a warmth there. Because it's not uncommon for Mr. Baldwin to, pat Richard Allen on the back, or to actually rub his back a little bit, or when he leans in to talk to him, he'll have the hand around his shoulder. Just body movements you don't do unless you're naturally comfortable with someone.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So that was something I picked up on all 3 days, actually. I then now have Diener asks for clarification about state actors versus all statements, and once again the suppression's dismissed.
She was looking for clarity because the defense states that they want all confessions suppressed.
And so that's when Diener said, are state actors working to interrogate Richard Allen, or just exist and happen to be the recipient of the admissions?
Right. Yep.
Are they, are they there on behalf of Ellie or not? Do you have anything through there?
Yeah, well, one big thing she said as she went through that, is he in custody for the purpose of interrogation? She got into about there being IDOC staff and then there being contractors. So, we'll find out later that Dr. Walla was actually, she was a staff member of a contractor that was hired to provide mental services to Westville. So that got into, but they're basically looking for whether there was influence or coercion for those statements while he was in custody, his circumstances of his custody. And what she said was, I believe that their motion isn't valid before we get to the first witness. And then she cited, and I don't know if it's Purdue or Purdy versus State. I guess it's probably Purdy versus State that she cited in her response. She says their motion fails. The defense is asking the court to make a new law, essentially, and it fails. This is not in the case law. She got into talking about the voluntary waiver of Miranda, and that the defense is jumping to involuntary. And then she said without, and I did end up missing the end there. And then, do you have any notes about the warden and the non-convicted detainees?
So what I have written down through there is that so some of my notes too here, I was being a little bit more observant, and so like I was on, like, during that part I was like, Baldwin also watching Diener pretty intently, and at times can't hide his facial expressions.
Yeah, he
because,
doesn't
like,
have
you
a
could tell
filter.
you could tell he disagreed with her.
Yeah, you can tell when he's not happy.
Rosie, of course, was the chair that day. That's when they introduced the affidavit of John Stevens, which is State Exhibit 7, who's the Director of Operation Security.
Yep, for the IDOC. Yep.
And this is where they mentioned that the most recent completed year data they have is in 2023. There were 36 pretrial detainees in DOC safekeeping. That's what I had.
Yeah. And then I had 8 denied pretrial detainees.
Yes.
So Diener comes back and argues that regarding Rule 2.7b, which is the basis in the law for suppression, and she says the defense is asking for basically to create a new law. Right. They say it runs afoul. There is no statutory right to bail. He's charged with murder.
Yeah. And in 925, Baldwin actually reached down, put his hand on the back of Richard Allen's chair. And you could tell he whatever he was saying to him, he looked incredibly supportive at that moment. And I noticed that. And then it was is it 2.7b, or is that's the motion you just said, right?
That's what I had. Yep.
And I have something that's something about dismissal, and it was pointed out that all the confessions were all made totally voluntarily.
Yeah. Yep.
Bucket of statements was referenced again in quotations.
Yeah, and she asked to dismiss their motion at that point.
That's right. So that's why I must have had dismiss.
And Judge Gall asked Mr. Rosie for a response, and he goes into some rule definitions. Do you have those? There's 3 problems. But all written motions must contain specific contention, cogent reasoning, and perfect legal authority. Which I had no idea what those are. So maybe someone else out there can help us out, unless you know.
Yeah, I
had no idea.
I have body of motion itself,
Yeah.
premature of what is custodial. Fifth and Sixth Amendment. 14th Amendment claims the companions aren't safe and reasonably qualified. It's stated the warden and Walla will be testifying. Rosie then says, I packaged the docs, the video, the audio where statements were made. I had Walla review them, and I sent to the court. Unclear if he, I said unclear if he sent them in a bucket. Sorry. I like to entertain myself a little bit sometimes. Gull asks at that point, how do you she asks how do the confessions to his family fall under this umbrella? And Gull then asks how statements made to Kathy and Janice, does that mean they're state actors?
Mm-hmm.
Rosie refers to Gull as her being the finder of facts, and argues that it's due process and the 7 month of pretrial safekeeping up there in Westville.
In the hole in Westville.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Rosie said that the due process for the 14th Amendment because of the way he's been treated.
Right.
With because of the safekeeping order that was issued by Judge Benjamin Diener without a hearing.
Right.
That's where the due process argument they were really hammering that on
right.
When Alan was first arrested, and
which is a fair argument, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really not familiar with a lot of that. I thought that they would put anybody charged like that, they would put them in, into a safekeeping type of an order, right. and probably suicide watch. But I don't know.
I think that was based mainly on his history, but I don't think that. I don't think anyone involved in this case has ever once suggested that Richard Allen would be best off in a gen pop situation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's in no one's best interest if harm were to befall him or someone else.
Yeah, the defense has admitted he shouldn't be in gen pop. So, Judge Gall indicated that the weight that the jury gives those statements is what it's going to come down to, rather than admissibility in and of itself.
Correct.
And I had Rosie responding. This was the good line, actually. Well, I thought it was. He says, I thought about that. If those statements are part of trial, that's putting the cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm.
We're asking you to render a legal decision on the righteousness of these statements.
Right.
And you mentioned about the facts at trial for the jury as determined by Judge Gall.
Yes.
And then Diener gets into Article 1 of the Constitution, the question of voluntariness. Miranda rights were given and waived voluntarily, the 5th and 6th. They had environmental factors as the coercion, and she stated, we cannot find a case where environmental factors influence the voluntariness of statements.
Is that where they also pointed out Richard Allen initiated all the phone call confessions that define, and Diener says that itself proves it's not coercion. Of the 61 statements, the majority were made in 2 months. Two people in different buckets.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
There was a point where Rosie bent down to the defense table. He huddled for a moment with Auger, and Baldwin huddled into. Of course, we don't know what they said. And then at 9:41 a.m. that morning, Rosie said, "We're getting down the road, / in the weeds." So I'm not. So it's not an exact quote, but it was along those lines.
Oh yeah, we're getting down the road to closing statements. That's what I had.
And then Gull said, "Thank you." And then I have an 8-inch. Oh, and that's when they put. She said, "Thank you," because I have an 8-inch thick lemonade filing to get to. Basically.
Yeah, so she countered back from day one theatrics that the defense had wheeled their trolley cart in and their 40 pounds of paper.
That lemonade filing, I mean, it was 8 inches thick.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure she had her court reporter recorder, I should say, print those out, or somebody did. I'm sure that just happened overnight.
Oh well, whoever's
it's probably digital. I'd like to think
whoever has ordered those transcripts. I would expect. I would expect the it'll the box to say "Don't lift with your back."
So there was one thing that and Rosie got into a bunch of stuff there about that he had pressure on him as he was locked up with no lights and no food. And there are cases, but he can't find a pretrial detainee without those things. He can't find one. So he was incarcerated without a due process hearing. He was hammering that one.
Right. Well, before that, I have that Gull. She does point out that she is taking the statements of dismissal of suppression under advisement.
Yep.
But Gull also then, she points out to the court that she has concerns over that there were no police interrogations, and this whole business about the state, are the family's state actors, are they not? And this is actually where she issues an order of separation of witnesses.
Yeah.
And so what that means is anybody that's testifying can't be in the courtroom until they are called to testify, and they can't interact with each other, so that they can't hear each other's testimony nor talk to each other in the hall about what they've testified about.
Right. And if they do, they'll be held in contempt of court, which she did state.
Right. And it's to prevent people from lining up their, their experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything you have before we go into the warden?
Nope. The only thing I wanted to say about when the warden comes on is that he had the state attorney with him seated off to the side, and we saw that a few times for some of the witnesses. But I did note that he did have an attorney with him while he was testifying on the stand.
Right.
He was seated off to the where the jury would sit.
And I hope that no one thinks that we're kind of flying through some of this stuff. I felt like a lot of the stuff that we talked about just for that first bit, a lot of it was procedural. A lot of it was stuff we'd heard before. And I think a lot of the stuff we're going to hear, some of the stuff that we're going to hear with Gallipo, again, is a little repetitive from things we heard at the June 15th hearing.
Well, when I was reviewing my notes, I was surprised actually that there was quite a bit of new things that come out with his testimony.
Okay. So I've got that he took the stand at 9:46 a.m.
You were very on it with your times. I didn't get in the groove with the times until like the afternoon when Walla went on, and then I was good. For some reason, you've got way more times than I do. I thought I was doing okay, but.
Well, I find it's a good way to track the day to see, for sure. When I, was looking to see, how long we spent, like that's how I knew Rosie took 40 some minutes that morning to Well, I'm not criticizing. It's like that's how long he spoke, giving his summation of the buckets and all of that. But know that I have that, Warden is it Gallipo or Gallipo? What do you say?
I say Gallipo.
Okay, Gallipo. That's what we'll go with. So he's the next witness. He's been part of DOC for 28 years. He worked as the warden of Westville for 5 years. I have that he left Westville in February of 24. It was what was referred to as a lateral transfer, to which Rosie said 2,800 inmates to 54 teen girls. I think implying that it was that he was demoted based on something from the March 2024 depot. But either way, so he's no longer the warden of Westville.
Agreed.
Do you have anything other than that in that section?
No, you got it. No.
So then I have the March 2024 depot claims Gallipo says Richard Allen is the first safekeeping and segregated in his 28-year career. Richard Allen's cell number at Westville was A107. For anyone that didn't know, and that there was a video camera in the cell when he was on suicide watch. The cell, there were 55 other similar cells. Some of them had cameras, not all of them, and that they basically considered that a prison in a prison. There was a camera pointed at his cell. I have that it was unclear at this point if it's inside or outside the cell, but that it does not play audio. It's just video, and it's preserved for litigious reason. Not litigious. What's the word? For court reasons, basically.
Yeah, that was testified about a little bit later, I think.
Yeah.
Gallipo did.
Yeah, and they immortalized all the videos from that camera. That's when
Rosie had asked. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
That's when Rosie starts to talk about Richard Allen's privacy rights, and how he's even on video going number 1 or 2 in the when he's using the restroom. To which,
oh gosh, okay, yeah.
I mean, it's humiliating, but I don't see a way around that when you're on suicide watch, and I don't wish it on anyone, but I just don't know how you get around, that if someone is.
Yeah, no, they have to keep an eye on them. It's not a hotel.
Right.
Like, I don't. This. Okay, sorry. Continue.
No, you're good.
It's prison.
Yeah. So he had a window in his cell.
Yeah, they called it a split.
It was basically a face level height. Allen's window was scratched or damaged. So when Richard Allen was there, it had to be replaced. We find out later it was replaced at the request of Dr. Walla.
Yeah.
But that unclear.
So I just
sorry. I was just saying they also claim at this point that the lights are on 24/7.
Yeah, is that where? Well, sorry, there was some things that I had that you're a couple more pages further along than I am, so I just wanted to get them before you've moved on, because I had written down some specific quotes. So I just wanted to add a little bit of context there. Rosie had asked, do you agree that the better part of 1 year, The first one was 255 units on a solitary basis at Westville. The first one was on a safekeeping order, and then solitary. Do you agree that the better part of 1 year that Alan was housed there, and it was November 2022 to early December 2023, and the warden testified yes, a little longer. Were there times where he was not in that? And Gallipo responded yes. And you got into the privacy. He was afforded very little privacy for periods of time. Yes, that's correct. Is it safe to say no privacy, a prison within a prison? And Gallipo responded, fair description. And then we had the Westville Control Unit, which is the WCU. You have to go through another set of fences and into a unit to reach Alan. And Rosie asked, did he have a video camera in his cell A107 at all times? And was it used for specific purposes? And Gallipo responded, yes. Was that for suicide? And he said yes. And they had a quantity of 55 suicide units. The same convention was followed. There's an observation cell. He gets the cameras, yes. 24/7, yes. Everything he did, yes. It didn't have audio, correct. And then Miss Maps, and Rosie says this, Miss Maps preserved all that video. Did you instruct that? What were your intentions? And this is where Gallipo responds, for hearings like this, to be transparent. And then you got into your description, so we're all caught up there. Sorry, I just had to catch that up for what I had. So we were into the. Are you still there?
I am. If I'm a little echoey right now, I had to charge my phone for a moment. So.
Oh shoot! Okay.
If it gets too bad, just let me know and I'll mute myself for a few minutes.
Yep. Okay.
I can't hear it on my end, so. But if you hear the feedback or echo, just yell at me.
Okay.
I went right into, so I missed some of those quotes that you were talking about. When we were sitting there, I was writing that claims the lights were on 24/7.
Right. So Alan was the only one to control his lights. Nobody else could control them.
We didn't know that yet.
No, we didn't know that yet. No.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that was the first time we were told that those lights were on 24 hours a day.
Yeah. And then, that's true.
5 hours. Rosie claimed that he was given 3 to 4 1-hour sessions a week.
Yep.
Gallipo was not sure if Richard Allen was on suicide watch right away in November of 2022.
Right. Yeah. He did give 2 other days where he was on suicide watch, though.
Right. He does say
April
that he
21st.
was on and off of it intermittently.
He said Gallipo testified specifically to 2 dates. April 21st, 2023, and December 5th, 2024.
Yes. Yeah, no, I was just referencing when he first got there.
No, it can't be 2024.
No, yeah, so when they asked about if he had been put on suicide watch right away, that was questioned. Do you have anything else on this point?
Just that there were intermittent periods of suicide watch, like you said. His privileges were cut off. His visitation, when he was transported, the number of guards changed. There was box over the handcuffs.
Right.
The box makes it more restrictive. He had the belly chain and the ankle foot shackles. And during this testimony at 10 a.m., I noted that Baldwin was talking to Alan, and Baldwin had his face scrunched up at Alan, like, that's brutal. That's the way that's what I wrote down.
Right. And no, I wasn't clear. the conditions that they were saying that changed for Richard Allen when he was on suicide watch. And now I understand he's a pretrial detainee, and that's a huge difference here. But those were all standard. Like, those were not things that were like specifically only placed upon him. Correct.
Correct. Yep.
Because sadly he was abiding by a lot of the DOC policies and standards, even though he didn't fit the normal criteria of the people that need to be following them. I have that his visits with his family, that he was shackled and cuffed, guards, belly chain, ankle shacks, videoed each time Richard Allen was transported with Ed Westfall. He was unshackled during his visitations. Do you have that?
Yeah, I do have that, but not. I'm just trying to find where you are. You're a little bit maybe ahead of me again.
Because I've heard that disputed. I've heard that people have said that, when he would meet with his family, that he was still fully shackled, and what I heard in that moment was that he was during his transportation, but then once he began his visitation, that some of his shackles were removed.
Yeah. Do you have your headphones in again, Aspen?
I don't. Is it bad?
It's the feedback's a little bit bad. Yep.
Okay.
There were 2 incidents. Do you have those 2 incidents where where Allen was placed back in his cell and he wouldn't remove his hands from the cuff board in the cell door? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So what I have is the 2 incidences were the Richard Allen would not remove his hands from the opening in the cell door. It's DOC policy that this is a cause for someone to get tased, because it's a sign of noncompliance, and any sign of noncompliance can result in tasing. Whether
two incidents of the same, right?
Whether someone I think thinks that's acceptable or appropriate, that's of course a different question. But that's apparently their policy. I have Baldwin whispering with Richard Allen a few times throughout this point. Now, with what you just said, there was something that when Diener got up in a little bit, I think we'll read it in the notes. She made a reference to the fact that she believed he'd actually only been tased one time, and that the second time had just been that he had just been threatened to be tased if he didn't comply. But again, I never heard a conclusive agreement on which of those things were accurate, because Gallipo didn't seem to know, according to him.
Gallipo testified that Allen had non-compliance but no threats up until that point.
Right.
And Rosie mentioned about the cell door, that someone else was there and during those interactions, and there were 3 to 5 times where Allen made generic statements, quote, "I killed those 2 girls," end quote. He mentioned them by name, is what Gallipo said.
Yeah.
And Rosie said, was there an actual investigation within the prison? And Gallipo responded that he wasn't aware. He doesn't recall interviewing inmates, and he hopes that he would have been informed. He had no knowledge. And then Rosie wanted to know if law enforcement was interviewing the guards, and Gallipo responded that he had no knowledge of it.
Correct.
And then
I found it hard to hear. Gallipo, during this portion of his testimony. And at one point, Mr. Rosie actually even asked him to speak up, which I was grateful for because I was having trouble hearing him.
Oh, okay. Well, Rosie did ask him about prison life in general in the WCU, and Gallipo said some inmates prefer it.
Right.
And he was asked, did Alan suggest that he preferred solitary? And Gallipo said no. And Rosie said it's a major adjustment for someone never having had any criminal issues before. And then he asked him about the two inmate companions, Lucy Patton and Jason Elliott. Yeah. And Gallipo said that he was not familiar. And Rosie said that that there had been confessions. And he wanted to know if it would be a violation of the inmate companion rules if Patton talked to his family about Rick's statements. And Gallipo says, I'm not sure what the inmate companion rules are. There's bed sheets and boards that the inmates fill out. There's medical records for the bed sheets.
Right.
And then Rosie wanted to know, how did the bed sheets get to law enforcement? And Gallipo responded, I'm not sure, maybe a subpoena.
Right. And we find that out, in a little bit. I thought it was interesting when Gallipo was asked, was Richard Allen on suicide watch? Was Richard Allen suicidal when on suicide watch? And Gallipo said, I'm not a mental health professional. And I believe Dr. Walla would be a much better equipped person to answer that. I have a little note there that, a lot of this was stuff that we heard at the June 15th hearing. And then I said, well, since I wasn't there, maybe they were just trying to catch me up. Joke. The Camp Plus program was the companion with Lacey.
It could have been. I don't have that in. I think that comes later.
That's when they talked about Lacey Patton.
I didn't have that. You tell me.
And I believe it was Patton that there was actually even references to in his that he even had talked to Alan about his baby mama drama.
Oh,
did you not? There was a reference to that in
geez,
I think the letter he wrote, maybe, or the
there could have been.
And they're not supposed to talk to him, they're supposed to observe and they're supposed to write down the log sheets, but they're not supposed to have two-way real communication with the people they're observing.
So I had quite a bit of. I'm not sure where exactly you're at, but I did have some more back and forth. If you want me to read it, it gets into the central office and things like that. Continuing on from, how did the bed sheets get to law enforcement? And Gallipo said, I'm not sure. Maybe a subpoena. Not at my permission. If those bed sheets got out. Central office is where I release it to, and Dr. Walla collects them, and that is upon a request from central office. So the bed sheets or the bed boards, they kind of intermittently use those terms, but that's where the inmates would record things. So Rosie wanted to know, do you think central office gave them to law enforcement? And Gallipo said it's possible. And Rosie said the chain of custody records were created at the cell. And Gallipo said there was a request made for the bed sheets. And did you require a court order to obtain them? And he said no. And then this part, I couldn't remember what it was in reference to. But Rosie said the media, and Gallipo said no. Do you remember that about the media, or do you have a note?
What about the media?
I don't know. That was in that whole line of questioning.
Like
Pardon me?
we were at the same place. Like when you were like, I don't know where you are in your notes. Like
Oh,
I was
okay.
literally
I
like
thought you
one
were.
line. No,
No,
because
sorry.
the very next thing I had was that that Gallipo was unsure how law enforcement got the companion log sheet. Suggests
Oh,
maybe it had been a warrant. Gallipo approved that they go to central office, and then Walla would collect them.
so we get into the bizarre behavior that was exhibited by Alan in April 2023.
Right, which is what led Gallipo to removing the companions, which
Mm-hmm.
and replacing them with guards.
Yeah.
To watch Richard Allen. Again, I had trouble hearing Gallipo during a few of the things he said during this.
He said one very important thing there. This is very important. I don't know if I haven't been watching much, but I haven't heard anybody talking about this. But the decision to remove these inmate companions and put the guards back on was the day after Alan received his legal filings.
Yeah, I have the date right there. I just said April 4th.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. Yeah, was it April 4th? That's what I thought.
3rd or 4th there.
Yeah, I didn't. I only have April 2023, and that's when the bizarre behavior
right.
started.
Which some of the examples that they listed for that, which it's not a comprehensive list because we've heard other things as well. But Cut himself was not necessarily one that I've heard publicly talked about a lot.
Oh, did they say that, Aspen?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't hear that one.
And they didn't elaborate, so I don't know. Could have been with a pencil. I'm not going to speculate. But that was washing his face in his commode, and that was when the first mentions of the covering himself in excrement. At this point, it's 10:30 in the morning. Gallipo testified that he himself never monitored any of the phone calls, and unless I've skipped over anything, the next thing my stuff goes into is some of the DOC phone system with GTL based, and the tablet and Baldwin and
yeah, the result before you get into that, there was only one thing that I had, and Rosie wanted to know if that was a more accurate reporting of Alan's bizarre behavior by the guards, and he wanted to know, did you turn those over to central administration also? And Gallipo said yes. And then you can get into that GTL stuff.
I'm going to let you do that because I'm down to 2%, so I've got to charge this again for a few minutes.
Oh, shoot. Okay. All right. So, yeah, Gallipo said that, excuse me, he said, I did not monitor any calls. So there's more than one, no, he said all of the calls are monitored with GTL. But then Rosie specifically wanted to know about portable phones being monitored by the DOC. And that comes into effect with Dr. Wallace's testimony and why Rosie was specifying about these different recording systems. But as Aspen said, the tablet communications, it was all done through GTL. Internal Affairs gets access to the texts. And he rests. I have him rest. Alan was nodding his head in agreement.
Yes.
As these statements were being made.
Did you talk about the cell conditions and the beds on the slats?
No.
So
not there. I didn't have that there. Did you have that?
So what I have through here is again, Baldwin and Richard Allen were talking a lot. Rosie said matters on floor. Richard Allen looked up and shook his head no. it is apparently standard that they eat on cardboard boxes. He had a metal toilet in his cell. There, people have been saying he slept on a mattress on the floor. They wanted to clarify that they are elevated metal slats that are specifically in cells for people on suicide watch. And that the defense was alleging that only his cell had no table and chair, which we then later, the warden testifies that none of the cells have tables and chairs. And during this whole period is when Richard Allen was nodding yes and no to kind of each one of those statements, either in agreement or disagreement with it.
Yeah.
At 10:33 a.m., Diener said, "Did you have anything to do with Richard Allen being placed?" Gallipo says no, and notes that 5 of the cells in that block have cameras. There was a new request by central office. They didn't explain really why or where it came from, but they then attached a camera onto the outside structure of the cell. Did you get that?
I don't have that. I have about central office making a decision, not me, is what Gallipo stated, and it was something about the video camera conversation. Not sure if that's
Right. And we then find out that there is a dimmer on the light in the cell, and the only person that had access to that dimmer was Richard Allen. So if the lights were on, it was not because of force or abuse. It was because he didn't want to turn them off. And that's where I also had the note that we find out that Walla is the one that requested the scratched window be fixed. His first tablet was broken. It was replaced for free and ended up being a newer model and having faster processing and more data. They went into the family visits a little bit, and I thought that was a little petty because this is a kind of a prison within a prison. So for the state to argue that, for Richard Allen to get a family visit meant 14 other people didn't get to have their family visits, I thought that was a little bit of a stretch. So just to accommodate Richard Allen, other families would all have their visits canceled. But it should also be noted that their visits were with convicted inmates. Diener asked a sarcastic statement at one point through here and says, "Did you tell him he had to confess if he wanted to visit his wife?" And he said no. I have a side note here where I said, I don't know what the warden does, but everything I'm reading sounds like central office makes all the decisions. Are you there? Hello? Are you muted? Turbo, are you muted? All right. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, what happened?
Oh, am I back on? I'm sorry. I was sitting there. I don't know. I have a bad connection here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, no, I can hear you just fine. I was just rambling on and on and on.
Geez, I was responding to you. I don't know. I was talking to myself, I guess. I was surprised at how much central office controlled everything. Were you?
Right. Absolutely. I'd never heard the word central office until
Right. Yeah.
until that Wednesday, and then I was like,
Yeah.
well, what's the warden there for? I mean, because
Yeah.
everything has to go through central office, apparently.
Yeah, I was very surprised.
And I and
Like
you know, and
Dr. Wallace seemed to have more power than him.
right.
You
And
know
I
what I mean?
always find it. I always find it very interesting, of course, with when you're if I'm hired to defend the rights of someone and prove their innocence, of course, my perception of something is going to be different than someone whose goal
Yeah.
is to keep that person, in jail for the rest of their life. And so I
Right.
really appreciate when we do get to hear, you know, the
Yeah.
contrasting views of like even little things like the fact that one side says there's tables and chairs in the cells, and then another says there aren't. I'm like,
Yeah.
so it really helps
Yeah.
it
And there
helps
was
me remember that you always have to look at things from multiple
a
angles
lens.
before you can just believe
Yeah.
or automatically assume something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even just with the tablet situation, like they made special accommodations for that because Gallipo testified that there were a few hundred inmates that still don't have tablets, and Alan was prioritized. And for with respect to the family visits, they were highly unusual. They had to cancel. I think he ended up testifying 14 inmate visits, and they allowed Alan 2 hours, and he was only supposed to have one.
Right.
And Rosie requested that the family visits allow Alan to have his restraints removed and to be unshackled to hug his wife. And I think we talked about this because seems to me we've had conflicting reports about whether that happened or not. Sidestepping from this hearing for the moment, but I don't know. He said that accommodations were made. He testified to that.
Yes.
Gallipo did. Yeah. And there was a discussion about trafficking, and that's why they're not allowed to have water.
Oh yeah,
Um,
there's stuff about water and trafficking. Um,
that's why there's always guards in the room. And he asked to listen to their conversations, and Gallipo said no to provide security. Did you review any of the documents regarding the taser incident? And when Alan refused to shut his door, the taser was used, and Gallipo responded, no. I was in May. I have May 2023. Do you
yes,
have
that's
that?
what I have. And yeah, because that's what I was talking about with how the second one was alleged to have just been a threat. Um,
Okay. So we think
I
that's this one?
it did not specify that I know of. It just said
Okay, yeah, because I
Gallipo
don't have anything further.
it was just that Gallipo was uncertain as to the answer of that. Um, they then went into a lot more about the companion system, um, and they started talking about legal mail a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
yep.
Gallipo testified
Yeah,
that he
there's
never.
ability. Hmm. Sorry.
I was Gallipo. He never discussed the charges with Richard Allen
Right.
or
Yep.
knew
Absolutely not.
about or knew about an inmate telling a family member Richard Allen was confessing.
Yeah, and
Gallipo
he was
then,
even asked if. Yeah.
sorry,
Sorry.
uh, Gallipo then, that's when he said that no inmate has a table and chairs inside their cell. Um, the beds are low on slats, only in the suicide watch cells.
Hmm.
And then I'll let you do whatever you were going to do.
Well, with respect to the legal mail, there was discussion about the Alan still had the ability to shove the legal mail through the door, and then Gallipo removed the inmate companion, and there was mention of 3 names here: Captain Gary Lewis,
Captain
Major
Gary Lewis,
Cornett,
and
and
Gallipo.
Gallipo. Yeah, they needed to protect the case and legal information. He was asked if Diener asked actually if Gallipo ever had to, if anyone had to stop Alan from self-harm, and Gallipo responded only once. There was a
I'm glad you
lockbox.
brought that up. I'm glad that you brought that last point up because I have it written down 2 ways in my notes, and it's because I couldn't decide after I heard it which one it was. Because when I first heard it, I have companions had to stop him 1 time from self-harming, and then I have it question mark, or did Richard Allen have to ask them to stop him 1 time from self-harming himself?
Hmm.
And again, we'll find that out with in the transcripts, but I'm usually on top of it, like, when it comes to, like, actual quotes. So for the fact that I had that question mark there made me uncertain of
Yeah,
myself.
I think it happened a little fast, and I literally wrote Diener's stop self-harm question mark, Gallipo only once. There was a lockbox for the suicide logs, and Dr. Walla was the one to collect those. And you touched on him ever asking him about his charges for the case, and Gallipo responded, never. Would you have knowledge if the companion was hearing confessions? He said no. Now, the legal mail was unique for Alan because typically inmates normally get copies of their legal, but Alan did get his originals.
No, he
And
got copies.
pardon me?
He got copies because of K2.
K2? Sorry, I'm not following you.
There was the mention of the synthetic marijuana.
Yeah, that was mentioned after this, but I specifically wrote and highlighted Gallipo testified Richard Allen did get his originals. The inmates normally get
Right.
copies, and that's where the introduction of drugs comes in with fake legal mail and smuggling. Did you
Right.
have that he didn't get his originals?
So, so well, and I'm gonna defer to you here because I'm gonna believe what you're saying. What I think is because I didn't realize this was even a thing, but apparently,
Yeah, I didn't know.
one way that they people smuggle drugs into prisons is um, they basically put it in like the ink of paper so that when the inmate takes the paper, puts it underwater, it
Mm.
liquefies the I
Oh.
heard the word is K2, um and that then they can smuggle drugs into the prison through legal documents, which
Mm.
is one of the only real protected rights that even convicted inmates have, is the privacy of
Right.
their legal documents.
Yeah.
I think it was interesting that um, Alan had 8 companions that would often be rotated out, and one of the reasons they would be rotated out was so that none of them were given too much access based on his high profile nature,
Ah,
and
okay, yeah.
to minimize their ability to get their hands on his legal mail.
Mm. I had that Gallipo stated that 1 or 2 times Alan had made a special request for an interview,
Yes, and that was
and he
very
turned over
interesting.
to internal of. Sorry.
And I said and that was a very interesting development, I
Hmm.
believe. And I think, yeah,
So he turned it over to internal affairs in this instance. There were handwritten documents. There were 4 or 5 pages that were written, and Diener asked to approach Gallipo and entered State Exhibit 8, which were 2 pages.
Yes.
And page 1 was evidence records request, March 5th, 2023 at 6:47 a.m. Request for an interview. And then April 5th was dated, and then there was a March document, I believe, that was dated. There was more than one request.
Yes. And I don't know if anyone's looked into like what like standard procedure is in a situation like that, but I believe that there are different avenues of correction or next steps that someone in the warden's position takes depending
Yeah.
on specificities contained in those letters. And I'm not alleging anything, but for he didn't meet with Richard Allen to sit and have the meeting with him. He turned it over to internal affairs, and my understanding of that is because that the contents of that did offer confessions and a request to change his his legal plea. I don't know if that's true or not. Of course, we will all find out. I think sooner than later. But that's
Yeah.
why it went to internal affairs, and then I
Yeah,
think
there
it's
was a
why they
chain of
also,
custody.
and that's why I think they focus so much on the chain of custody for that, because
And
I
that
think it'll
occurred
come
at
into
the end
play.
of March.
Mm-hmm.
So internal affairs went to pick them up themselves. It was Miss Maps and Jessica Signet, who is a CPO officer. I'm not sure on her last name there, but they put it in an evidence box for a transcript.
Right.
Sorry,
Right.
transport.
Right.
He started the first few times when he got them. There was bizarre behavior daily.
Yeah.
Diener
And then
asked
when
how he would approach. Sorry?
Gallipo, like I said, Gallipo never actually sat down for that interview regarding what Richard Allen was requesting, but when Richard Allen didn't, when he did confess to the warden, apparently he did not give details, but he did verbally confess to Gallipo once while he was on a walk around when he was walking the cell block.
Yeah.
And that it's also noted here at this point that the suicide log books contained detailed confessions. I have a note
Yeah.
here about a. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I had. And he confessed and he admitted to the crime. And the suicide logs indicated more detail of what Allen spoke to.
Right, and I have a note here that I didn't fully finish, but it says healthcare confession, nurses station when Dr. Martin was present, and so I
Mm-hmm.
must have missed something in that statement there. But I picked up on nurses station. But that Allen, when asked, would agree sometimes that he needed nothing and that he'd been given adequate
Mm-hmm.
accommodations and care. At one point, Gallipo apparently even offered Richard Allen loaner television, which most
Yeah.
inmates and most people, regardless of their detainee status, did not have. Richard Allen rejected it.
Yeah, and that was done under a mental health progression order. It was similar to that, is what Gallipo testified regarding that TV. It was to get him back on track, so to speak. But I do want to say that the interaction with the medical, there was multiple people there, and it was recorded on a handheld camera. It was at the nurse's station, and there was several people, including Dr. Martin, there, and that particular confession was recorded as well on the handheld. Diener asked, was it an interrogation?
As far as I know, all of them have been, other than possibly the clergy one, which they can't locate. But I don't think they're using any that can't be actually materialized.
Well,
I don't think they're listing anything other than ones that can be materialized in the 61 direct confessions.
So there's no sound, though, right?
There are transcripts. Or wait, no, those are for the phone calls.
Yeah. On the cameras, it seems to me there's no sound on at least some of the cameras. I do recall that. I don't think we got into that at the hearings, but I believe that's been previously brought forth in either filings or from the June 15th.
Right. I just remember that, and this is later, but I remember when Harshman was on the stand, he gave a very detailed definition of what they considered a direct confession. It didn't really leave much wiggle room to to put your own spin on it. I just don't have that it's in my notes, just I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Well, Gallipo did state that Allen had ample opportunity to express that he was experiencing coercion or forced admissions. He did state that. And Rosie got into the Insight case management software and accessing criminal history information. He asked Gallipo if he had the ability to see why people are there and if there was an electronic record, and Gallipo agreed that there were both those things. And also on the internet, there was more personal information at RDC. Right. He can look at their packets in the records room, which he never has.
Did you have this? I had a little note on there that because I heard this was much worse at the June 15th hearing of last year, but I don't know if you were watching like the physical interaction between Gallipo and Attorney Rosie.
I was at the end, yes.
But there were it definitely. I would say there's probably no love lost between those guys.
No, there isn't.
And I'm not saying there's who's to blame for anything. But I did find it interesting that Gallipo, he would say something, he would with a lot of confidence or whatever, and kind of almost be smiling a little bit. And then I would notice the next question Rosie would ask would have a little bit more aggression to it. And it's almost kind of like
absolutely.
they went back and I felt like they went back and forth like that for, a good 9 or 10 questions. So you could sense there was some history in their interactions. But neither came out and were outright rude to each other or anything like that or unprofessional at all. It just personality took over a little bit for both of them.
No, well, I think it was that, but it was also Rosie was trying to rattle from watching this all go down, and this is exactly the point of time of the testimony where it started to get heated, and Rosie's voice started to get louder. And that's when I looked up. And that's happened to me now at all 3 sets of hearings.
Right.
I'll be taking my notes, and then
that's when Gallipo's smirk would get bigger.
he was not rattled at all, and he was staring at Rosie. He was sort of smiling, sort of smirking, and I have a note here that Judge Gall was looking at Rosie, and it seemed like she was trying to figure out what he was implying as he was going on about these questions about Googling and other inmates at other facilities and DOC records. And he could not rattle Gallipo on the stand. And as it gets through this, I don't know what else you have, so I don't want to jump ahead, but if you want to continue on with what you have at this part of testimony, then I'll get to further observations here.
I think, yeah, this was all kind of happening at 11:23. I've got Richard Allen used one of these opportunities to look back at Kathy and Janice and smiled again. At this point, I felt like, like there was almost like a little optimism in his in the look that he gave them, which again is my own take on what I was interpreting from what I saw. But the next thing I really have over here is that Gallipo said from the interactions he did have with Richard Allen, he seemed like a nice guy. I could tell this is where I was starting to get a little ready for lunch and uncomfortable in the chair, because I wrote Insight Program can't access other DOC, i.e. Pendleton, and then it's like 11:30 Gallipo off the stand. So
I ate a little bit more.
yeah, I figured you would.
I guess I wasn't as hungry.
Well, I think I just needed to get my butt off of that seat for a minute.
Well, stepping it back a few minutes at 11:15, Gallipo made an important component of his testimony where he discussed that in the control room that there's only one officer. Other officers are not allowed in the control room. And we kind of heard different testimony from a different witness a little bit later here, but that was important to note that that's what was supposed to be transpiring. And Rosie stated, so the WCU is considered a disciplinary unit? Yes. We have others in there for other reasons, being sanctioned. They're all the same cells. Rosie asked, Allen was treated the same as the punished inmates while in solitary? And Gallipo disagreed. They had done replacement of his window. They had him a new tablet. That was inconsistent with normal procedure. And Rosie was getting heated, and he really started to insinuate that Allen was given a tablet over all these other inmates, basically because, whoever was controlling it wanted him to continue to confess or whatever. And Rosie's voice started to raise, and he says, was it hard for you to get a new tablet? And he really was implying, like, the way that this went down in court, it really did come across to me, because I have a few notes in here, to that extent. And then Gallipo, I don't actually have his response, I guess, because I was busy looking at them, but they did have to cancel 14 visits to accommodate for Allen, and the guards are not directed to listen to conversations. And he was asked if they have pens, and he said no. And then there, as you say, there was 8 companions. And Rosie says the inmate companions could be the most dishonest people on the planet. Oh no, maybe that actually might have, inmate companions could be the most, I'm not sure if this is Gallipo or not actually, but he said, I don't control the medical staff. They are on contract. I am the boss. I'm not a mental health staff. And then he was asked if companions go right. He was asked if companions go through mental health training, and he
Right. He
said
was
they have
unaware,
some
right?
type of training. So,
Is that when they brought up that they're paid?
no, not my notes.
Okay.
That was
I could.
later, I believe.
Okay.
So what this is, Rosie was really pissed and raising his voice, and the warden was literally leaning on his hand, like, his fingers up, leaning on his hand, and he just had this gleam in his eye, and he was smirking at him.
Right.
And he could not be rattled. And I just happened to look over. I happened to look to the left in the court, and I did notice that Mike Patty was leaned back, and he was just like leaned back, and he was just enjoying every minute of it. I'm not gonna lie, he had a gleam in his eye too. Like, he was just like, because that warden, you can imagine the type of men he's had to deal with in 2,800 prisoners, and he's
Right.
seen
Which
a
you're sure
lot
it's
and
not.
gone through a lot. He could not be rattled. He really couldn't. And I do remember Sarah telling me the same thing about the June 15th hearing the year before, and Rosie had gotten heated with him then, like you said. So I just
Right.
thought that was really, that was kind of a moment.
Well,
and
and of course
and
I don't know people. Go ahead.
pardon? Oh, you're on video there now. Did you do something to your
Oh,
camera?
I almost hit it. Um, no, I was gonna say really quickly though. You know, I can't, I don't know what someone's intentions are, or like what's behind their, what they're thinking. But I mean, if I and if I mean if I'm Brad Rosie and I spent a year and a half defending someone that I genuinely thought was innocent and that I thought did not deserve to be in the facility they are, um, I wouldn't think it was funny to be arguing against the reasons I didn't think they should be there. Um, so I mean, I can see both sides of that, absolutely. You know, and we know now
He was
he's in Cass
Mike.
County. So, and I'm not talking about Mike.
Yeah.
I
Oh, no, but I mean, it was just. I mean, it was more of it got, like, your observation of, with Baldwin and Allen and their connection, and you could see it.
Mhm.
Well, you could see, as like you said, the friction, like the friction from the June 2023 hearing continued on, because to me, my take was that Rosie was trying to imply improprieties, and he just wasn't getting the answers that he wanted, and he just couldn't face it. That was my take. That was my
Right,
take only,
right.
and it might have been Mike's take as well.
And
But
it
I
very
don't.
well may
I
have
mean, I
been.
I know it was Sarah's take. No, I shouldn't
And
speak for her,
it
but
very
she'd already told me. But pardon?
it very well may have been completely accurate. I just I'm like like I'm not saying that like someone would be right or wrong about it. I'm just saying that I can see where the contention could come into play if you do believe
Yeah.
such opposite things. Um,
There was only one more thing that I have before Miss Maps came on, and that was the chaplain. Um,
mhm.
they had one specific request for the chaplain. Otherwise, he went weekly.
Yes, yeah, that he was available. Did he go weekly or was he available weekly?
Um,
Um,
well, I wrote down he went
he
weekly.
had access to him weekly, and then he asked for him one time. That's what I
Yeah,
wrote down.
It could be. I wrote down that he went, but it could very well have been. I don't know. I don't recall of whether he actually went or not. I
Probably
probably wrote
starting
that
March
down wrong.
21st. Probably starting March 21st, he started going more often. Um,
Yeah.
on 11:30 is when Gallipo went off the stand,
Yep.
and he was dismissed as a witness.
And
I
then
have
we had
again.
a new person come in to the courthouse at that time. Into the courtroom, rather. Kathy was joined by a friend of hers. She came in at that time at 11:30.
Oh, the girl that was sitting next to me, or on the other side of the intern.
Yeah, yeah. Kathy's
Okay.
friend that had the purple hair. She came in at 11:30.
Okay. And so that is when we. So that Alan looked back right around that time, and he nodded once again and smirked. And kind of smiled towards Kathy and Janice. So there was a lot. He was very lucid that day, and he was very engaged. And like I said, that was
Yeah.
probably the day I saw him look back the most amount of times, kind of with the look of optimism on his face while looking at Kathy and Janice.
So
Do you
if
have
we
then?
could just take a little break, Aspen,
Yeah.
are you able to pause or no?
I'm sure there's a way I could probably figure out how to do that. What? Why is there? Is my feedback really bad?
Well, the feedback's really bad, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I thought the feedback is actually very bad, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to force my way through this because I'm like really tired. But I know you don't want to edit, so
Um,
let me look. There's only there's like
we've
5
got
pages.
we've got maps, and then we've got Holman. That's it. That's all
Moment.
we have left.
Okay. Are you able to edit this piece out or?
Um, yes. Let me get my headphones back on because I have enough battery now, and I'll just edit this
Okay. Yeah,
part.
because it's feedbacking really bad. Like I can hardly hear.
And I apologize, everyone. I was having feedback issues, so I had to use my corded headphones, which then eliminate the ability to charge my phone at the same time. Really high tech production right here.
Oh, are you not going to edit that out?
Of
Can
course
we
I.
tell them what time it
Of course
is?
I will.
If you're going to leave it in, can we tell
Of
them what
course
time it is?
it is. Right now it is 3:06 a.m.
Okay, thank you.
Um,
If you're leaving this in with me bailing
I'm
because I
not.
can't make 5 more pages because I'm going to fall over, then
If I
if
can
you're
figure out
leaving
how
that
to
in,
edit
I
it,
want it
I
fully
will.
declared with that.
I'm
Would
just
you
gonna put a
say?
disclaimer over it. I'm just gonna put a disclaimer over it and be like, nudity. Sorry. Okay. So. Um. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Now you made me
All
laugh.
right, Miss Maps. Let's go, Miss
Let's
Keneva
go.
Maps.
Okay.
Let's
So here we
bang this
go
out.
with. I don't know if Miss Kenny. I don't know if Miss Maps would appreciate you saying that about her. Um.
But she was a
So we
lovely
have
lady. It's Keneva, Kenneva. Maps
EVA.
with 2 P's.
Yes, and she came out at 11:30 a.m. She's the lead investigator at Westville DOC, and she basically works in the internal um, affairs department, and she's been there for 27 years. So there's a lot of tenure between some of these employees.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with that, or do you want me to?
Um, sure. She got into the discussion of their systems they used to use, the OIS, Offender Information System, and that had been they'd been finished with that system for 13 months. The information system was to access personal health documents if needed, and they're now using a system called Delta now.
Right. Like the airline, right? Delta.
Yes, Delta. She said Ms. Mapp stated that there were only certain departments, investigations, classifications, administrative, the warden, caseworkers, case managers, and the unit team managers. They cannot access it for personal use. And
Right.
Rosie wanted to know, if you did that, would it result in termination, violating confidentiality? Did you have a container where you asked to store videos taken from his cell?
Yes.
And
records and documents on Richon.
Yeah, written documents, and they didn't store log sheets.
Mm-hmm.
They took a hard drive to the warden.
Right.
And
if anyone remembers, when Gallipo was on the stand, he was asked the same question about is there a system that you can access personal information about?
Yeah.
And his answer was different than this. Which, she said that Delta, which used to be the iOS system, which of course made me think of Apple.
Yeah. Oh, it's OIS.
I'm sorry. OIS.
Yeah.
And that's when she said that it's absolutely against policy to use for personal use. This was 11:39 a.m. and this is where it started pouring rain outside, and all the lights started flickering in the courthouse. A lot of people,
I remember that.
No one's mentioned it, I don't think, and a lot of people have kind of forgot about it. The lights were flickering on and off, and
I do remember.
It was a little creepy being in that courtroom, and all of a sudden the thunder and lightning going, and then the lights are going on and off.
Were you scared?
No, I was not scared. It was just it was a moment.
You had me for protection. You had a lot of protection there.
I was trying to bother those deputies.
Well, what else happened after the lights flickered?
Okay, well, so then there was mention of who came. And when I very first got done with hearings, I couldn't remember if any of the ISP or investigators had gone to Westfield to interview Richard. And I do have it here that Mullins came and interviewed Richard Allen. Rosie asked her, what about Baldwin? And she said she was unfamiliar with that.
Baldwin or no, not Baldwin.
No, I'm sorry. Holman.
Holman, yeah.
Yes. So Mullins contacted Maps
and Harshman as well. He was not there.
Yes, and then Maps supplied them with a video camera to conduct their interview. Then there's a mention of ViaPath, GTL. Maps assisted law enforcement with access with an access code to obtain Richard Allen's messages, etc. However, she never facilitated any meetings between law enforcement and jailhouse staff.
And she did not speak regarding the investigation. They did not speak of it at all. Right. And I just wanted to state that it was ViaPath or GTL for the phone system is what I wrote down. Now maybe it's all as one. I don't know. I don't think. I think you said it all as one. Like,
it was ViaPath anyway. GTL. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have asking about.
So she was asked about. Yeah. And Norse paganism.
Right.
She said she was familiar. Gang activity.
Do you have anything more in depth on that? Because I did not add. I did not add
Hmm.
anything more to
I
that
mean,
part of
that's
it.
what I had. I had gang activity. And then
Right.
Rosie asked um, if she was aware of any investigation into staff members regarding the patches on the vest, those types of things. And she said
Yes.
yes. She's the boss, but she does have
But
10, and she has 8 investigators and 2 interns under her, which she delegates to.
right. But she
And that
also did
this is
make
where the
it.
plus program. Pardon me?
Go ahead. She also did make it very clear at this point, though, that um, even though she was aware of it, that is not a something that she handled herself. So like addressing the patches and like so like that situation was not something that she took the lead on to address.
Right,
So
and Diener
she was
also
aware of it, but that was about it.
and Diener brought it up um, that she was not familiar with the safekeepers and asked if that was a part of her job.
Yeah.
So I think she must have said no, and I didn't write that down. But the plus program gets we're back to the inmate companion. It's common knowledge to the staff and inmates that they do it for a certain amount of time cut in their sentence is why they participate in that program. So there was an
But that
identification
is
in the
not a given.
confession letter. Pardon?
But that I do also have though. But that is it's not a promise. So it's not like like that you get an absolute
Mm,
but that is something
right.
that's a
They
reward.
work for it.
That the main benefit that they said is that it's a much more positive community to reside in among people, whatever that means.
And I do have a side note here, a sidebar on my notations that Baldwin is resting his head on his hand.
Yes.
So he needed lunch as well. And there's a confession letter to the warden that was passed to internal affairs that they
And that's
identified
yeah,
twice.
and that's the one we were referencing
Twice.
earlier. That
Twice he tried to confess, but they were in possession of one. Now, Miss Maps testified that it was common for 2 people to be in the control room at the same time. I have this question, but I don't have the answer. I hope you do. I said, she was asked, did you go talk to Richard Allen about the letter? Do you have that? Do you have the answer? Because I do not have the answer for some reason.
No, because at one point she actually didn't. She at one point say she never herself interviewed Richard
Yes.
Allen.
Thank you.
Um,
Right.
and I have it written down as a quote in here that when Maps confirmed she received the 2 requests from Richard Allen to Gallipo, which are the Gallipo ones that he turned over to Internal Affairs. And this is where it said in the court document that in that letter it was to plead guilty. And that was in her role in Internal Affairs. That was at 11:55 a.m. and she was then excused from the stand.
I have a side note here.
Go ahead.
When Miss Maps testified that it was common for 2 to be in the control room at the same time, which I highlighted because I remembered that Gallipo said it was only 1. Baldwin and Rosie put up their pad of paper and had their own little sidebar. So they were all over that. They were having a conversation about it, and they actually put their pad up to cover them when they were talking. That's what I have.
Oh yes, when they put their pad up, I do remember that.
And
I was
Alan
like,
was
"That's
staring
rude."
at Kathy. Yeah, that's rude. We can't see what they're saying.
I was like, "Do you
Alan
know
was
how far we
staring at
drove?"
Kathy.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. He was staring at Kathy while the pink cuffs got put on.
Yes. Um. So yeah. That. So I mean, her. So Maps. I mean, she really, she packed a lot in there. But she was honestly only on the stand. Um.
Not long.
It's so funny. Like, you fill out all of these notes for some of these people, and then you look and you're like, oh well, they were only on the stand for 20 minutes. And then, like, as we're gonna learn, like, in the next video that we're gonna do, um, which will not be at 3 a.m, but I think between the two of us, we have about 100 pages of notes on Dr. Walla. So
Yeah.
I think that deserves its own video. But we're not quite done tonight, because we do have probably one of the most interesting parts of the day. And never one to disappoint. After lunch, we came back, and at 1:05 p.m., they called witness Lieutenant Jerry Holman to the stand. Unfortunately, they could not find him. And there was a little back and forth about him knowing he was the first one. And Nick said he's probably down in
Rosie
my
got a little dig in there.
And
yeah.
And so they went and they collected Jerry Holman. He came up.
At 104.
Oh, I had 105.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Wasn't long. He wasn't missing long.
It was an analog clock.
And Nick said he's in the far office. He's here.
Right. Then the first thing I have written from Jerry Holman in that testimony, because remember, he's there for that purpose that day, to talk about the suppression of the statements that Alan was making. The first note I have is that law enforcement does not have access to the communication between Richard Allen and his attorneys. And I feel like this is an important part of the testimony too. It was at that point that ISP began monitoring Richard Allen's communication after the first few confessions that he'd made to his family. Jerry Holman did confirm then that law enforcement did subpoena the letter to the warden. They got a
Hold
warrant.
on 1 second.
Wait.
Sorry.
Am I wrong?
I think you might be, because in my notes, I have when he went to Westville, law enforcement was assigned to monitor the calls. Trooper Harshman did it, but Vito did it mostly, but actually Detective Vito was on it early on. Not for very long.
No.
But
the only thing I have
believe
written is that they started monitoring all of Richard Allen's communications after the first few initial confessions to his family. So I mean, they may have been, keeping records of them, but I think they actively started monitoring them.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That was the discernment I took from that. I mean, of course they had records of them all already.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because actually Rosie said, were you monitoring calls prior to the confession through GTL? Holman said yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was Rich Davies was also included. I have Mullins, Rich Davies, Holman, and Harshman interviewed correction officers and or inmates. Can't recall the date and time that received the info that made the confessions. They subpoenaed the records, the written statements for the wife, mother, officers.
Can I say my favorite part after you're done with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, finish your statement. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. I'm sure you've got something profound here, because mine's just rolling through this GTL stuff.
No, it's just it was just that it was just at this point that we were all kind of like engrossed in like we were starting to hear about these confessions and and who'd interviewed who and like how long they've been monitoring the calls and you got good old Jerry Holman on the stand there and then all of a sudden Gold just kind of she just kind of she kind of just halts
No,
the ongoings of the no, it was not. Because
1:27 p.m. it was right before Dr. Walla come on. But you can do it now if you want. Go ahead. I just burst your bubble. This is after the great big thing we learned.
You are correct. You are correct. This is when I noted it that there was someone missing from the courtroom. So I'll come back to that other part later. You can continue.
You can do the big reveal.
I do have that Rosie then focused on specific dates between November 22nd through March 1st, 2023, then skipped over all of that summer and went to August 2023 through December of 2023, saying that Richard Allen had asserted his innocence. But then again, like I said, he left out any mention of the dates between March 2nd, 2023 and August 2023. Law enforcement never sat down and interviewed internal affairs from Westville. They never interviewed the warden, and they never interviewed Walla at the time.
So Rosie had asked, were the monitoring of the calls happening weekly in real time? And Holman testified that they would knock off calls in bulk. And he was asked, did you listen to those calls yourself? And he responded, no. Harshman did documentation of phone calls of interest. Someone would follow up with the prison above and beyond any audio, video documentations from the prison, suicide watch, guards. At some point, it switched to companion. Then it went back to guards after confessions were happening. And Rosie said, what about the warden? And Holman said there was a letter. And Rosie said, did you routinely go through this process? And Holman said, yes. We did continue to get info and continue to monitor the calls. Rosie said, what was the last time you were asked for info? And Holman says, I can't recall. I don't think we've gotten any from Wabash. We did not re-subpoena. I did listen to calls between December 2022 and March 1st, 2023. I listened to a few. I did not hear him asserting his innocence. Once before arrested, interviewed. From between August 1st, 2023 and December 2023, Allen proclaimed his innocence. Holman would get the calls sent to him. There was interest for any incriminating statements. Of course, those would be of interest. And Rosie asked, did you start directing the investigation to go to Westville? And he said, and Holman responded, I don't think I directed. He says, Davies, Harshman, and Holman went to the prison to recover information regarding the incriminating statements. There were transcriptions. And he was asked, do you believe you asked any inmates if Allen said he was innocent? And Holman responded that the guards said he had said he was innocent. I didn't ask, I don't think. And Rosie said, did he say this? Asking about his behavior, and he said, conversations about anything other than confessions. And Holman responded that his behavior info was volunteered by the inmates. So Rosie started specifically asking, guards plus inmates? Yes. Dr. Walla? No. The warden? No. Internal affairs? No. How did you get access? I'd look up the phone number of the contact that I had. He was a major, I think. I'd search him up and I'd go through the metal detector. I'd go in a prison within the prison, an administrative room in the basement. And I'll let you take this over because this is where we come up to the very huge reveal about the box cutter. Take it away, Aspen. I'm speaking long enough.
Okay, if my feedback gets too bad again, just let me know. And you can take it over. But so this is when I have he was asked, did you follow up on CVS or family based on anything after the confessions you heard? Jerry Holman said, yes, we went to CVS, box cutter used and discarded in the CVS dumpster. To which my immediate question is, well, when did they conduct that search? Because did they conduct it when they arrested Richard Allen? Because I doubt that. It doesn't sound like it. It doesn't sound like they were aware of that until they heard Richard Allen
Right.
state it in a confession. And what they're expecting to find in a dumpster 6 years later, I don't know. But I found that very interesting.
Yeah. It was a
They
great point
mentioned,
you raised about that.
which was,
About, was this the first time that they suspected about a
right.
box cutter?
Exactly. There was a mention of the fact that there were hundreds of hours of monitoring. Holman was asked, did you follow up with the family? And he then said, maybe a friend of the daughter, which I found to be an interesting statement as well.
Yeah, that was kind of crazy,
Because that's
wasn't it?
not something we'd heard.
It was pretty shocking. This
Um,
this this was this was
Go ahead.
shocking to hear.
Yeah. Well, and it's the first mention we ever had of anything involving.
Yeah.
Really, it's the first mention we've had of Richard's daughter in any of the hearings or anything other than the fact that she's on the witness list.
Yeah.
Um,
Good point. Yep.
He did then say, yes, we interviewed Brittany and Kathy. Still unclear what Rosie meant by friend of the daughter. At 1:25, Diener got up into the cross. Holman never himself interviewed Richard Allen while in DOC custody. And then here, the part I tried to spoil earlier is when Gull kind of stopped court. And this was, let's see, 1:25. So we're 25 minutes into the hearing being back in place. And Gull says, excuse me, where's Mr. Baldwin, Mr. Rosie?
Yeah.
To which Mr. Rosie said, he had another professional commitment this afternoon.
It was
And
pretty shocking too.
I won't I won't pretend to like understand what she might have been thinking in that moment, but she definitely had a look on her face.
Yes, and it
I
is on
got
the docket.
yeah, and I got the impression that that was the first she'd heard of it in that moment.
Yeah. I don't think that's proper protocol, is it?
I don't think it's. I've heard many attorneys say that, when you have co-counsel, if one of them is taking the lead for something that one day,
Okay.
and the other one
It was really a big
has another
deal.
obligation. Right. Now, as far as giving the judge the courtesy of knowing, I don't know. But I don't think it's uncommon that he had to go attend to another client probably.
Yeah.
And like I said again, I found Baldwin to be I thought Nick was quiet that day. I thought Diener was very confident, very strong. I told you that the day, I thought her pacing was a little slow.
Yeah. Well,
That just my
especially with
personal
Walla, you
preference.
said.
And
Yeah.
I thought that I thought Baldwin was charming. So that takes us up until when Dr. Walla takes the stand. And we'll have plenty more to talk about with her, and then with Harshman, because we still have
Yeah.
two big
Probably. Yeah,
witnesses for
huge.
this second day.
Yeah, and Walla testified for 4 hours straight. We might have had a break in there. I can't remember. I guess we'll find out when we review our notes. And Harshman
And
was
I
a
think
very,
Harshman was Harshman
yeah,
2 hours.
had to be. Well, 5:30. What time we get out? Well, he was a good hour and a half, I think.
Right.
Yeah, it was very good testimony. Yeah,
Right. Harshman,
very
I know that we had a
interesting. And
yeah.
well, I
Well, is there
think
anything
that's
you
a
have to?
wrap.
Is there anything that you have to say before we head off of this video?
No, I don't think so.
Do
It's
you think?
just remembering, the way that things went down. It's still pretty vivid, and it's really nice to hear what you have, because, as you pointed out, in our day one segments, we were literally sitting beside each other, listening and observing in the same room. And at times we would have differing takes a little bit on things. Certainly, like we're not all looking up at the same time, so it's just great to
Right.
hear.
And neither.
I might
And
get something in my notes and you've made the observation, and vice versa. So it's great to put it all together, for me anyway, because I'm learning a lot from you.
I agree. And it's not like we sat down and compared these notes before we did this. Of course, like while we were in the court, we'd had a few conversations about, like, oh, did you catch the name of that or whatever? But I
Right.
mean, we really
Yeah.
have not had any conversations about
No.
what you thought about this or this. So your opinions, of course,
No.
your own. Mine are my own. My own.
Yeah.
But I know
And
we still have two more witnesses to go this day. But how do you think? Like, where do you think it stands as far as the meeting the burden to suppress the statements at this point that we've gone through at the end
I
of
mean,
Jerry
I think
Holman's
we've really,
testimony?
I think that we've got some solid testimony. There's certainly something up about the control room, although I don't really know what. I mean, it's that protocol being broken, but it sounds like. But we know, we know Dr. Walla also broke protocol with things. Now, whether that impacts the validity or the weight of the confessions, that's not for me to analyze. But I mean, they've got some statements and some facts and testimony to work with there, perhaps. For I don't know if it meets, what is the burden, like what do they have to show? Because I think, like, Diener, she wanted it, she doesn't even think it should just be denied. The motion should just be denied on principle. And I think we can all agree
Right.
that that's not going to happen. There's no way
Right.
that these confessions are going to be tossed because of, reading
Right.
protocol within the prison. Like, I don't see it. We haven't seen evidence of any type of coercion, and Alan himself hasn't said it. Like, Gallipo testified that he had plenty of time to express that he was being forced to confess, and that hasn't happened.
Right. And I mean, are we gonna have some buckets allowed in and others, left outside? I'm not sure, but it'll be interesting to see for sure. But like especially after we talk about Wallow's testimony and Harshman,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I mean, to me, those are the kind of where the weight lies in the testimony from the second day. And I apologize if we were a little scattered this evening. It was not at all because of not being interested in it. It's just a lot of it was repetitive, and I really want to get to some of the other stuff, like the Wallace stuff and the Harshman stuff, and then the stuff on the third day. So
And one thing I did want to also let the viewers know is that both Aspen and I, we haven't really even read or watched anything that anybody else that was there has put out. So,
no, I lived it. So
obviously, we've been asked plenty of questions. We've had to kind of negate things that seem to get twisted around as they tend to do.
right, and sadly, I'm sorry.
From bits and statements and stuff. So that's why we felt it was important to share what we heard.
Right. And I want to be, and I want to stress, like, none, neither of us are legal professionals. Neither of us are mental health
Mm,
professionals. And and I definitely, I mean, I, I kind of was hesitant to even put my notes out there, but I'd had so many people asking me for it, which is
yeah.
humbling, and I'm so grateful for. And I
Yes.
wanted
Yeah.
their
And I feel
turbos
the
as
same.
well. But
Yeah.
I also, I know that sometimes when you put something out publicly that you took from a testimony or from court, um, like I never want someone then to take that and twist it and put their own misconception onto it. So it can be a little tricky too, where I'm like,
Indeed.
that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
anyway, I hope this has been insightful and enjoyable. We've only got 9,000 more to go, but hopefully, once we get them all recorded, we will get them out in a very quick amount of time. And I can't wait to hear everyone's feedback, because I'd like to
Yeah.
know if there's if we've picked up on anything that anyone else missed, or if someone terribly disagrees with something we've said.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'd like
Yeah.
to know as well. So um,
Yeah. The facts are good. you know, like it's difficult. You have a lot of things going on in that environment, and it is hard to hear at times. And then there's a few times where I was like, okay, that's not right. Like, as an example, the time on the bridge that was
217.
testified about. Yeah, but I mean, I knew what I heard, and I just thought, well, I'm just going to put out what I heard, so it's hard not to correct those types of things during
Right.
testimony, or you do the
Right.
best you can.
And my goal is definitely not to, is not to say I think this person did amazing and this person did a horrible job, and because I'm not qualified to make those assessments. But I really just kind of wanted to record what I saw, what I heard, and what I felt from those things. Which,
Yeah,
for anyone that
which is
says,
honest.
that a normal citizen, doesn't doesn't have the qualifications to do that. That's pretty much what our entire judicial system is built
Yeah,
upon, is the fact that people just like you or I are the ones that end up deciding on these trials and these cases.
very
So
true.
I think that our input and our takeaways are actually valuable.
Well
Um,
said. Yeah.
and I would,
Yeah.
like I said, and I would never try to harm someone or damage their career, or um, or just be mean to anyone. So
No, we know that. We know that,
but anyway,
Aspen.
I'm going to let you go, and we will talk tomorrow. We'll probably record Dr. Walla at some point. And
Yes, and not at midnight.
no,
We
no.
cannot tackle Dr. Walla at midnight. It's not happening.
Right. I'll also be on a live. I'll also be on It's a Crime and Shame tomorrow night at that time. So I wouldn't be able to do it anyway.
No
But
worries.
okay, I will talk to you tomorrow, Turbo. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aspen.
Thank you.